Now, we know,
Communist! You are a communist! You will never be This is not Cuba! This is not Cuba, you fool! So communism will never be there! Never be there!
So let's talk about Zohran Mamdani today, because earlier this week he was handed the somewhat bad news that Eric Adams would be dropping out of the New York City mayoral election, and this is obviously something that consolidates support and gives a little bit of a boost to Andrew Cuomo. Although I have to be honest with you, it still doesn't make Cuomo all that great of a candidate, and when you look at the way the polls are breaking down, unless Curtis Sliwa, the Republican, drops out as well, it is still looking like Mamdani is going to cruise to an overwhelming and rather easy victory. As you can see, his odds on Kalshi dropped a little bit, but went from like 85 to 83%, right? That's what we're dealing with. So this is unfortunately looking like it's going to be the reality that this country will have to deal with, but that is exactly why Trump is now addressing the question of, so what should we do about this? Because I want people to understand, when it comes to the threat of Mamdani, it's not just about some like loony public bus program or socialist grocery stores or something like that. I think the biggest and most dangerous thing we have to consider is the fact that he is trying to lead, much like Portland, Oregon, by the way, is right now, this open insurrection against the federal government when it comes to the enforcement against crime, right? Let's basically hand the city over to the violent mob, as well as specifically immigration law. So that said, that is exactly why, like he has done with many other sanctuary cities, Trump is now threatening that, hey, if Mamdani ends up winning, this may come down to an issue of stripping federal funding from New York City. And we'll talk about all of those details in today's video, so I'll run you through that, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate your support. And that said, here is the statement from Trump today, saying self-proclaimed New York City communist Zohran Mamdani, who is running for mayor, will prove to be one of the greatest things to ever happen to our great Republican Party. He's going to have problems with Washington like no mayor in the history of our once great city. Remember, he needs the money from me as president in order to fulfill all of his fake, and they are fake by the way, fake communist promises. He won't be getting any of it, so what's the point in voting for him? The ideology has failed as always for thousands of years. It will fail again, and that's guaranteed from Donald Trump. Now, we have a lot to say, but I first of all want to show you the pathetic response of Mr. Tough Guy himself, Zohran Mamdani. So check out what he had to say.
What's your response to that? I know you're worried that New York will be in a worse position with the federal government if you become mayor.
I think that Donald Trump is going through the stages of grief. He began with denial, where he said that there was no way we could win this race and that he would use every tool at his disposal to ensure that that was the case. And we saw that in phone calls that he had with Andrew Cuomo and briefings that he had with pollsters. And now we've reached the point where he's coming to terms with the fact that we're going to win this race. And he's coming to terms with it because New Yorkers are tired of a politics here in this city that has more to do with Washington than it has to do with the people of this same city. And what we're seeing is even when you have a mayor who is collaborating to every extent possible with this administration, you are still seeing a federal policy of detaining New Yorkers as young as 6 years old, of withholding more than $50 million in funding from our schools, of taking $80 million out of a bank account. You still see an administration that looks at this city as something that is to be punished each and every day. And what this city deserves is someone who will fight for it.
Yeah, well, what I first of all find laughable about that response is that he initially frames himself as saying he's not going to get into the battles with Washington. He's going to be fighting for New Yorkers, and that's what he's really about. It shouldn't be about federal politics. And then proceeds to spend the next minute explaining why he's going to spend his entire mayorship getting into federal politics and basically fighting against Donald Trump. And it's hilarious because if you've listened to his campaign for the past 3 months, there's been a dramatic shift, right? Initially, he ran off of this sort of socialist, like hippie campaign of affordability and rent stabilization, and the government ran grocery stores and all this stuff. And yet now it's just become Trump derangement syndrome like the rest of the Democrats, right? He basically has become like them. Hey, let's have this visionless candidacy that's just vaguely, I'm going to oppose Donald Trump, and that's what I'm all about. But really, this represents the Trojan horse that You know, a lot of people, supporters of Zohran Mamdani who really think he's going to be different don't truly understand. Right? You thought you were voting for some hippie socialist utopia. In reality, you have a mayor who is more obsessed with building his own brand and fighting Trump than he is in even taking care of his own city. And then furthermore, a Trojan horse for truly a crime-ridden Portland-style or London-style nightmare. But we'll talk more about that in a second. I first of all want to further address the issue of federal funding. This is something that could be a serious problem for Mamdani if Trump actually follows through with it, which I hope he does, because I've heard a lot of these threats, and then who's been defunded thus far. But that in mind, you of course are hearing the responses from liberals who are saying this is authoritarian, this is unprecedented, you can't withhold federal funding from cities or states. Who does that on a partisan basis, right? But I'd like to note to people, by the way, this happens all the time. Frankly, I'm actually disappointed that the Trump administration has not tried to use federal funding in a more aggressive way to withhold thus far. I understand there's courts and all that stuff. But I'd like to point out, for instance, that in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan threatened to withhold funding for infrastructure unless all of these states raised their drinking ages to 21, which I would argue is kind of a very petty and frivolous reason to do so, but that was very important back then. Even though, look at the Joe Biden administration, where upon my own research, I found out that multiple Medicaid grants were cut for Georgia and Texas over partisan disagreements. Oklahoma actually got into a lawsuit with Biden over Title X funding. And ultimately what happened there, by the way, guys, is that the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Biden administration, arguing, yes, you do actually have the executive authority to withhold that very funding. This is all why I say all this garbage that you always hear from obviously mostly left-wingers, but even some people on the right who just think the Trump administration is going too far with the weaponization of government. I say that no, federal funding is not constitutionally mandated in any way. The government can withhold it for basically any reason if it truly wants to. And it is absolutely something that needs to happen not just to New York if Mamdani wins, but all of these sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. Because I look at an issue like the drinking age, which I find to be so insignificant, and say, if the federal government withheld because of that, or Joe Biden's administration withheld because of things like the Dobbs decision, or like the fraud detection software that basically Georgia was using for Medicaid and stuff like that, then you mean to tell me that cities and states that are engaged in what is basically an open rebellion against the United States and its immigration law, should just be allowed to happen? Oh, keep funding it? No, absolutely. And by the way, Trump does bring up a very relevant point, because Zohran has spent the last week basically admitting that all his plans to make stuff free, for instance, is not actually free. And so where's he going to get the money from? I mean, this is a serious question we ought to be asking ourselves. Zohran, for instance, just today on MSNBC, went on to admit that his free bus plan is not actually free. It will, of course, cost taxpayers between $600 to $700 million every year. And yes, in other words, expect higher taxes so that we can have free bus fares, which nobody really asked for. And there's an obvious, really bad consequence that's going to happen as a result of this. It's actually a really stupid idea, but take a listen.
Really, people who ask me questions about, is it possible to make buses fast and free? I say the cost would be about $600-700 million, which is less than Andrew Cuomo gave to Elon Musk 1 year in tax breaks of $959 million. Showing people the context that we're in and building a coalition where they may not see themselves in me, perhaps, but they may see themselves in the best and the brightest that I'll hire to surround me in City Hall.
Okay, so let's break this down. First of all, there you have Zohran admitting he's going to try to raise taxes on New Yorkers. Whatever, I don't even know if that's going to be enough. But secondly, I again raised the question to Zohran. How exactly are you going to pay for this stuff if you're going to be openly antagonizing and constantly getting into a war with the federal government, with the president? Like, that just doesn't seem smart, does it not? And then thirdly, I want to address this actual idea of the free buses and why it's so genuinely stupid. Because you'll get into these conversations with Mamdani supporters and they're like, what's wrong with free buses? I don't see the issue. Isn't that nice to have them free? Okay. First of all, Zohran did run a campaign on the issue of affordability. That is true. And I would argue he was smart for doing so. I disagree with his solutions to basically everything. But yes, it is true. People in New York do have these problems with cost of living and all that. All of that said, number one, I don't know a single New Yorker who said that bus fares were the issue, right? If I could just not pay for the bus or the subway, I could really like level up in life, but the inflation is killing me. Not at the grocery store, not in rent, not in insurance, not in the buses, guys, right? So that's why I say, first of all, and just in terms of the funding, it is such a petty and nonsensical and irrelevant thing to spend that much money on, because this is like not really what is causing the affordability crisis, is the buses or the subways. But all of that said, what then will be the consequence of free buses? Do you know where I'm going with this? I want everyone to take a guess right now. Yeah, that's right. Much like you see with fare hopping in terms of the subways, when you make something free, who ends up getting on them in a place like New York City? Exactly. The vagrants, the mentally ill, schizophrenic people on the drugs and all that. And we've seen many cases of this. This is not exactly a conspiracy theory. And so essentially what Zohran is presenting is, well, yeah, you'll have free buses, but nobody will want to go on them because they're that freaking dangerous. And if you do, I mean, yeah, it might be free, but you're also taking a serious risk with your own life. That's the other fundamental reason why it's so stupid, okay? And I think also furthermore, anti-Mamdani people, and I don't care if you're just a Democrat who doesn't want socialism, whatever, I think we need to all be clear about this too. The biggest threat of Zohran Mamdani's candidacy is not directly the socialism, right? It's not just that the economic ideas are bad or expensive. It's the fact that the downstream result of all of that is going to be basically to turn New York City into an even more anarchic, criminal, crazy, like third world nightmare than it already is. In a number of different ways. Hey, let's flood the public transit with all of the vagrants who already cause a bunch of problems, but let's multiply that problem by 10, right? Let's let all the criminals out of jail. Let's also enable probably mobs of Antifa that are coming very soon. So it's going to be like Portland essentially on steroids. And I would furthermore say, Portland, Oregon, a prime example of what happens with Mamdani's kind of ideas, which is it all starts off, right, as this like nice hippie utopian experiment. That's what Portland used to be known for like 20 years ago. You know, it's kind of like a cool artsy hipster city. A lot of the workers work in like co-op fashion and everyone's so happy and it had this nice reputation. And then what happens? Because you basically are so open or free stuff for everyone, whatever. It just the mentality of the leftism. And by the way, Portland doesn't nearly have the gang problem and all that other stuff that even New York has. People start to take advantage of the system, people start to go crazy, and then it spirals into what Portland is today. New York City, that's about to happen here on a grand scale much faster, and that's something kind of off topic maybe, but I want to make clear about Zohran's candidacy. Your life is not going to immediately be ruined by the higher taxes or the socialism. It's the crime. It's the crime. Make that clear to people, and we'll talk about that more in a second. That said, again, back to this question of where is Zohran going to get the money from all of this? Here you, of course, also have heard that many of his campaign advisors, who actually do indeed directly work for the Democratic Socialists of America, have talked in the past about how they plan to transform New York City into a sanctuary city, not just for illegal aliens, but for so-called gender-affirming care, where people will be given free flights, hotels, trans surgeries, and prescriptions, all paid for by taxpayers. That is right. This is Zohran, ladies and gentlemen. So let's play that clip as well as show you Zohran himself talking about this $65 million he's going to give for the city from trans care, which I again say, where are you planning to get the money, buddy?
Zohran is literally attempting to do what conservatives say, we want to do, which is provide gender-affirming care to anyone who wants it for free, and we're going to like ship people, we're going to fly people in and pay for their hotel rooms, and we're going to do all of the like Fox News stuff. Like, we're getting ideas from Fox News. I want to do that. We're like that. We wrote the platform with him. The team was so happy to work with us on this, and now he's going to be mayor. New York City could provide trans health care for every trans person in the country who, can't afford it. And it would be a blip on our radar.
And one of the things that we've said, beyond saying that we're going to make this a sanctuary city for LGBTQIA plus New Yorkers, beyond saying that we're going to establish an office of LGBTQIA plus affairs, is also that we're going to provide $65 million in funding for gender affirming care, the same amount of funding that the federal government threatened to pull out from local providers for that kind of work. And in this moment especially, if we want to fight the Trump administration, we have to do so by fully funding our own services, taxing the wealthiest New Yorkers and corporations here.
Okay, again, Zohran, how are you going to pay for that? You're going to lose federal funding. Oh, he says, we're just going to tax the rich. We're going to tax the wealthiest New Yorkers. Okay. They could just leave. Many of them already have left. They're probably going to leave even more. Like, Florida is going to become even more overcrowded now as a result of your candidacy. But again, I ask the question, fundamentally here, what is the plan? How do you plan to source any of this money? Which is further the problem with, like, utopianism. Nobody really knows. It's just like, let's say a bunch of stuff. Oh, free buses, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, they're going to be insanely expensive, come at higher taxes, and be full of vagrants, and you can't even use them. But they're free. But they're free, right? It's like the same thing with the government-ran grocery stores, right? They've already tried this experiment in Kansas and other places. It fails. All the shelves are always empty, but hey, it's subsidized by the government. It's extremely cheap. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so is a food bank. It's not going to be something that is actually going to improve your quality of life. And of course, who could forget the last thing I want to talk about here? Not only does he want to do that, he also wants to give $100 million in taxpayer dollars to lawyers in order to protect illegal immigrants so that way they can give them free housing under the right to shelter. That is right. Free housing, $100 million for illegals. Still no clue where he's getting the money from this. So take a listen.
Our campaign is one that stands by the actual enforcement of the law as it is here in New York City with sanctuary city policies that have kept us safe. I would also commit to increasing the staffing of our law department by 200 to bring us back to pre-COVID levels, and to ensure that when we look at this city, we are using every tool at our disposal to keep New Yorkers together, to keep families together. 400,000 of our residents are right now in urgent risk of deportation. The city knows that when it provides legal assistance to those same New Yorkers, their chances of going home increase 11-fold, and yet it has only assisted fewer than 200 of those New Yorkers. That's why also a cornerstone of our campaign is a commitment to increase funding for those very legal defense services by more than $100 million so that we can ensure we're taking every step we can to keep New Yorkers safe, to keep New Yorkers together, and to show the world that they are welcome in this city.
Ah, yes, because this is what everyone asked for. This is what they all wanted, guys, was $100 million on illegal alien defense funds and migrant shelters in your own neighborhoods, guys. Yeah, of course. This, of course, does stem from the very idiotic Democrat mindset that you hear a lot from, like, the dorks on MSNBC, that, for instance, goes along the lines of, well, the Democrat voters want to see their politicians stand up and fight. We need to start aggressively pushing back against this administration. How often do you hear Eric Swalwell or Tim Walz or all of these stupid dorks say stuff like that? And it results in garbage like this right here, right? Oh, Trump is anti-illegal immigration. Let's be as pro-illegal immigration as humanly possible, and that'll motivate people, and then we're going to run into 2026, and that's going to go fantastically. Of course, that's a really stupid idea, but a lot of these people genuinely believe that because they live in such this tiny Democrat bubble where they genuinely think all of America has turned against Trump, or they don't agree with Trump on anything, and he's the most unpopular president ever, and this is going to go so great. And they're going to get reality checked again, is the truth. And I would also argue even the Democrat voters right now who are so in support of Mamdani, oh, he's going to really fix or change things, are also getting hoodwinked on this front. Because you notice something about his campaign platforms, right? He says his big issues, or at least he used to say, affordability, rent stabilization, all those things. But you notice what he's really now fighting for? Oh, let's give $100 million to the LGBT, $100 million to illegal immigrants, $100 million to, I don't know, fighting Trump or some garbage like that, the free buses that no one wants to use. Is that in the very end, his core campaign promises are not going to get funded, are not really going to get fulfilled, because ultimately all of these leftist candidates get audience captured, and because Zohran Mamdani is so popular, particularly with that radical far left Democrat base, who do you think he's going to spend his mayorship appealing to? The people who voted him just because of affordability issues, or the radical base who was like, yes, more money for gender affirming care, more money for illegal immigration, be the maximalist anti-Trump guy you could be? I think you know the answer there. And furthermore, as I will constantly say about Zohran Mamdani, the most dangerous part of all of this is when we answer the question, where is he going to get the money? Because he's not going to get the money from the federal government, obviously. He's not really going to get it from raising taxes on wealthy New Yorkers, because guess what? They're just going to leave. No, we know the answer. He's going to get that funding, and he's already making it very clear, from emptying the jails and defunding the police. Don't believe me? Just take a listen to what he said on this very campaign trail. I again asked the question why this is not covered more by his opponents, because to me, this seems actually more important, like it's more fundamentally a danger to your immediate life than, say, socialist grocery stores. But take a listen.
Oftentimes, we've even found as legislators, when we go into these courts, the term violent crime is even used when people are stealing packages. Violent crime is even used when people are accused of burglary and there happens to be a housing unit in that same dwelling. So violence is an artificial construction. And we have to be very clear that what is happening here with these district attorneys, that is violence. That is violence of the highest degree.
Violence and violent crime are artificial constructions, says Zohran Mamdani. I want you to keep in mind the context here too. He's calling out the DAs of New York City that are already extremely woke and far left. Okay, how many stories have we seen out of New York, including, I believe, Jordan Neely himself, of, hey, repeat offender arrested like 10 times, allowed out again. The Lake and Riley killer actually was let out on no cash bail in New York City. Even Kathy Hochul said, you know, she's fed up with all that stuff. No, Zohran Mamdani is saying the opposite. He's saying they're not going far enough. Criminals have not terrorized New York City enough. That is the real danger that he poses, right? That's what he's going to turn New York into. And it's going to be a useful reality check of what happens when you have like socialism, but also a so-called open society, whether that's open borders or open prisons or all these things, right? Which is sometimes on a small scale, like you can live communally. You know, there's a reason why historically for decades, kind of more socialist policies were fine in Europe and they're very popular. But notice the moment they open the borders to the entire world, it all falls apart. Because when you're going to have this like free stuff for everybody mentality, if you allow it to basically be taken advantage of by the entire freaking world, and of course, as I said, right, you have something like free buses. By the way, public transit requires what? Social trust. And yet you undermine the social trust by letting all the criminals out because there's no such thing as violent crime, apparently, and they're riding on the buses because they're free. What do you think's going to happen to that society? It all falls apart, okay? And I want to point out, by the way, that Zohran is not done either, because here he is just this week refusing to walk back his opponents, his comments, I should say, on the police, where he has said things like they're, quote, racist, anti-queer, and a major threat to public safety, and they function in many ways to punish poor black and brown people. AKA, he's going to be even more anti-police than the NYPD has gone in the last 20 years. Apparently, that has not been enough. Take a listen.
Yeah, Hannah. Over 20 days ago, you said that you would apologize to the NYPD for comments you had made in the past. Is that something you're planning to do when you're elected mayor, or before then, while you're still campaigning?
The thing that I have appreciated the most in conversations around policing is the conversations I've had with rank and file officers. Those are the conversations where I share my reflections about where we are in this moment, where we've been, and also what it will mean to build together to deliver that public safety. It's in those conversations that I focus on, as opposed to speaking about police to people beyond police. It's actually speaking with those same officers, those rank and file.
Yeah, more on topics.
Oh boy. Well, we're certainly in for one of the craziest social experiments in human history if Zohran gets his way. Because socialism has been tried, communism has been tried, that's all true. But it hasn't also been tried in this like pro-anarchy way where, again, it's not just let's have socialist economics, let's let all the criminals and vagrants run the show while we have socialist economics. That's an extra level of disaster, honestly. You know? Because people often try to compare Zohran to, say, oh, the Soviet Union or communist China, but I actually disagree. Because in those places, if you were stealing, if you were committing crimes, they threw the book at you, you know? This is something completely out there different, right? China doesn't have open borders. The Soviet Union didn't have open borders. So this is really gonna go a certain way. But all of that said, I will say that I am glad at least that the Trump administration is vowing they're not going to fund this insane social experiment, because we've already seen what happened to Portland. We've already seen what happened to other cities in this country. There's absolutely no reason why the federal government or the federal taxpayer needs to be complicit in this absolute garbage nonsense. I would prefer that Mamdani not be mayor in the first place, but if he is, best have it that at least the federal government boycotts it, is what I'm going to say. But all of that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.